Episode 1, The Discovery. On a Monday, September 8th, 2025, at a towed car yard in Los Angeles, California, a routine worker approached a white Tesla Model Y that had arrived days earlier. The vehicle had been abandoned in the Hollywood Hills, reported to have been parked for weeks, perhaps more than a month, without anyone claiming its presence. The afternoon sun beat down heavily on the car's metal. The worker, accustomed to sorting through forgotten cars, repossessed vehicles, and cars that told silent stories of their former owners, opened the trunk. What he found would change an investigation that had lasted more than 500 days. Inside a plastic bag, shrouded in shadow and decay, lay a human body, dismembered, in an advanced state of deterioration. The smell was unbearable. The discovery was impossible to ignore. The worker stepped back, dialed the emergency number, and within minutes, the scene was filled with sirens, red and blue lights, and the growing murmur of a crime scene just beginning to unfold. When Los Angeles Police Department detectives arrived at the impound lot, they began trawling through the vehicle's information. The shiny, modern Tesla Model Y was registered under a name that immediately caught their attention. The car's owner was David Anthony Burke, known professionally as D4VD, a 20-year-old singer-songwriter who had risen to fame just 3 years earlier. His alternative music, initially created in his bedroom using free software, had garnered millions of streams on digital platforms. His songs Romantic Homicide and Here With Me had become viral anthems on TikTok, catapulting him from a teenager playing Fortnite to an international star with a record deal. But now, his name was linked to something much darker. Investigators confirmed there were no previous reports of the vehicle being stolen. The Tesla had been ticketed 11 days before the body was discovered, while abandoned in the Hollywood Hills. All indications were that the car had been left there deliberately. Questions began to pile up. Why was that body in D4VD's car? How long had it been there? And who was the victim? To understand how a young singer ended up at the center of a homicide investigation, you have to go back 3 years to 2022, when David Anthony Burke was still a relatively unknown teenager. Born on March 28, 2005, in Queens, New York, Burke moved with his family to Houston, Texas, during his childhood. He was homeschooled after 7th grade, which led him to spend long hours in front of a screen, playing video games, and exploring the digital world. His musical career began almost by accident. Burke uploaded Fortnite videos to YouTube, but he constantly received copyright claims for using commercial music in his clips. Frustrated by the restrictions, he made a decision. He would create his own music using BandLab, a free music production software. Burke began composing songs in his bedroom. His first tracks appeared on SoundCloud, simple, melancholic pieces that spoke of heartbreak, loneliness, and teenage emotions. On July 20th, 2022, he released Romantic Homicide. The song, with its dark atmosphere and introspective lyrics, went viral on TikTok. Millions of users used it in their videos. In a matter of weeks, Burke went from being an anonymous content creator to a musical sensation. In September that same year, she signed with Darkroom and Interscope Records, 2 major record labels. Her single Here With Me peaked at number 60 on the US Billboard Hot 100. The success was meteoric. In 2023, D4VD released his debut EP, Petals to Thorns, followed by The Lost Petals. He played festivals, opened for SZA on her SOS tour, and performed at the prestigious Camp Flog Gnaw. His music was described as a blend of alternative pop and contemporary R&B, with lyrics that resonated deeply with Gen Z. Burke was also known for his love of anime. In interviews, he cited series like Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, and My Hero Academia as major influences. He even dressed up as anime characters at public events. In 2024, he continued releasing music. Feel It was featured on the soundtrack of the Amazon Prime Video series Invincible. Remember Me appeared in the 2nd season of Arcane. His career was on a steady rise. By 2025, D4VD had released his debut album, Withered, and was on a world tour. In April that year, he performed at Coachella, one of the world's biggest festivals. During his performance, he attempted a backflip and landed face first on the stage, a moment that went viral on social media. Burke took it with humor, joking about his humiliation ritual. Everything seemed to be going well for the young singer, but something dark was about to come to light. We go back to September 8, 2025. The body found in D4VD's Tesla had not yet been identified. Forensic experts were working against the clock to determine the victim's identity. The state of decomposition was advanced. According to the initial report, the body had been inside the vehicle for an extended period. The high temperatures in Los Angeles had accelerated the deterioration process, complicating the investigators' task. The Los Angeles Police Department classified the case as a homicide from day one. There was no doubt this was a natural death. Meanwhile, the media began covering the news. TMZ, known for its exclusives in the entertainment world, was one of the first to report the discovery. The headline was impossible to ignore. A body had been found in the car of a rising pop star. Speculation began immediately. Was D4VD a suspect? Was he cooperating with the police? What did he know about what had happened? The world waited for answers. But the truth was even more disturbing than anyone imagined. 8 days after the discovery, on September 16, 2025, authorities finally identified the body. It was Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a 14-year-old girl, although she was only 13 at the time of her disappearance. Celeste had been missing since April 5, 2024, more than 500 days, more than a full year. Her family had desperately searched for answers. Her face had appeared on missing persons posters. Her mother had publicly pleaded for information. And now, finally, they knew where it was. But the answer only brought more questions. What had happened to Celeste Rivas Hernandez? How did her body end up in D4VD's car? And what connection did she have with the singer? The investigation was just beginning, and what they discovered would change everything. Episode 2, Celeste's Life. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. In April 2024, she was 13 years old. She was a teenager like any other. She attended school, had friends, and spent time on social media. But on April 5th, 2024, Celeste disappeared. Her family reported her absence to the authorities. According to records, the young woman simply didn't return home that day. There were no signs of a prior fight, no clear indications of what might have happened. She simply vanished. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The search for Celeste stretched across the city, but there was no sign of her. Her desperate mother shared photographs of her daughter on social media, pleading with anyone with information to contact police. But no one knew anything, or at least no one spoke. For over a year, Celeste was just another name on the long list of missing people in Los Angeles. Her case received no significant media attention. It was a silent tragedy, a broken family waiting for answers that never came. Until September 8, 2025, when his body was found, when authorities identified Celeste Rivas Hernandez as a victim found in D4VD's Tesla. They immediately began looking for connections between her and the singer. What they discovered was disturbing. According to TMZ, citing sources close to the investigation, Celeste's mother revealed a crucial detail. Before disappearing, her daughter had mentioned that she was in a relationship with someone named David. The name resonated loudly. David Anthony Burke, D4VD. But there was more. Investigators noticed something that further solidified the connection. Celeste had the same tattoo as D4VD on a finger. An identical design, a coincidence impossible to ignore. Shared tattoos between couples aren't unusual, especially among young people. But when one of them is a homicide victim found in the other's car, the meaning takes a dark turn. The questions multiplied. Was Celeste really D4VD's girlfriend? When did their relationship begin? And what had happened between them that ended in tragedy? One of the most disturbing aspects of the case was Celeste's age. When she disappeared in April 2024, Celeste was 13. D4VD, born in March 2005, was 19 at the time. By September 2025, when her body was discovered, Celeste would have turned 14. D4VD was 20. The age difference raised serious legal and ethical questions. In California, the age of consent is 18. A relationship between a 19-year-old man and a 13-year-old girl was not only inappropriate, it was illegal. If D4VD and Celeste had a relationship, as her mother suggested, that meant there were potentially criminal elements beyond the homicide itself. Investigators knew they needed to reconstruct the full timeline of Celeste and D4VD's relationship to understand what had really happened. While the media was covering the case, an unreleased song attributed to D4VD began circulating online. The title of the song was simply Celeste. The song's lyrics, according to reports from multiple outlets, including the Express Tribune, describe an obsessive relationship. They spoke of intense love, of possessiveness, of a bond that crossed healthy boundaries. The name Celeste appeared repeatedly in the lyrics. The coincidence with the victim's name sparked a wave of speculation on social media. Was this song about Celeste Rivas Hernandez? Had D4VD written a song about their relationship before she disappeared? Or was it just a macabre coincidence? Until then, there was no official confirmation that the song was related to the case. Authorities hadn't publicly mentioned it as evidence, but its existence added another layer of mystery to an already complex story. D4VD's fans were divided. Some defended the singer, arguing that the song could be about anyone named Celeste. Others condemned him, seeing the lyrics as a veiled confession. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Since the body was discovered, D4VD had not made any public statements about the case. According to Rolling Stone, citing law enforcement sources, the singer was cooperating with the investigation. This suggested he had spoken to detectives, provided information, and perhaps even offered his version of events. But that cooperation didn't mean he was considered innocent. In homicide cases, authorities often describe persons of interest as cooperative, even when they are prime suspects. D4VD hired lawyers. He canceled tour dates. He completely withdrew from public view. Her social media, once active with posts about music, anime, and life on the road, fell completely silent. Her last post before the body was discovered showed a photo of a concert, screaming fans, and bright lights. She seemed to belong to another world, another life. Fans speculated endlessly. Some believed D4VD was innocent, a victim of tragic circumstances. Others considered him guilty, a predator who would use his fame to lure a vulnerable teenager. The truth had not yet been revealed, and while the public waited, investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had really happened. Celeste Rivas Hernandez's mother finally broke her silence. In an interview with TMZ, although she didn't show her face, she shared devastating details about her daughter's last days before she disappeared. Celeste had been acting strangely, she said. She would go away for hours without explanation. She was constantly on her phone, texting someone whose identity she never fully shared with her family. When her mother asked her where she was going or who she was talking to, Celeste would simply reply, "David." The mother didn't think much of it at first. She assumed he was a schoolmate, maybe a friend. She didn't know David was 19. She didn't know he was a pop star with millions of followers. He didn't know that the next time he would see his daughter would be in a morgue, more than a year after her disappearance. She trusted him. The mother said, her voice cracking with grief. She thought he loved her, and now she's dead. The words hung in the air, an accusation without trial, a truth without proof, but loaded with a weight no one could ignore. Episode 3, The Investigation. After the identification of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, the forensic work was just beginning. The body had been in extreme conditions for over a year. Advanced decomposition complicated determining the cause of death. Experts needed to analyze every bit of evidence to piece together what had happened. The Los Angeles Police Department assigned its homicide unit to the case. Experienced detectives, specialized forensic experts, and evidence technicians worked together to solve the mystery. The first thing they needed to establish was the cause of death. How did Celeste die? Was it strangulation, blunt force trauma, poisoning? The condition of the body made this difficult to determine with immediate certainty. They also needed to establish a timeline. When exactly did Celeste die? Was it shortly after her disappearance in April 2024? Or did she survive for weeks, even months, before something terrible happened? And most crucially, where did she die? Was she murdered in the Tesla? Or was her body transported there after her death? Investigators began tracking the movements of D4VD's Tesla Model Y. Tesla vehicles are equipped with advanced technology, including a built-in GPS that records every location the car has been to. They also have external cameras that constantly record while the vehicle is in motion. Detectives requested access to this data. They wanted to know where the Tesla had been during the critical months between Celeste's disappearance and the discovery of her body. Vehicle camera footage could show who drove the car when it was abandoned in the Hollywood Hills, and potentially who placed the body in the trunk. But there was a problem. Much of the data had reportedly been deleted or was unavailable. Tesla stores video information for only a limited period unless the record mode is manually activated. If no one had saved the specific recordings from the time in question, that evidence could have been lost forever. However, the GPS location history was more difficult to erase. Investigators began mapping the locations where the Tesla had been parked over the past year. What they discovered was disturbing. According to Fox 11, D4VD's Tesla had received a parking ticket on August 26, 2025, 11 days before the body was discovered. The ticket had been issued in the Hollywood Hills, the same location where the vehicle was ultimately reported abandoned. This meant the Tesla had been parked in that same spot for at least 11 days before the discovery, probably longer, as parking tickets aren't always issued on the first day a vehicle is illegally parked. The crucial question was Celeste's body already in the trunk when that ticket was issued? If the answer was yes, that meant her body had been exposed to the Los Angeles summer heat for at least those 11 days, dramatically accelerating decomposition. It also raised another question. Why abandon the vehicle there? The Hollywood Hills is a well-known residential area with luxury homes and residents who pay attention to suspicious vehicles. It wasn't the ideal place to abandon evidence of crime. Was it panic, carelessness, or was there another reason? Researchers began to construct a detailed timeline. April 5th, 2024, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, 13, disappears in Los Angeles. April to August 2024, Celeste remains missing. Her family reports her missing, but there are no significant clues as to her whereabouts. August 2024 to August 2025, a dark period. There are no public records of Celeste's whereabouts or what happened to her during this time. August 26, 2025, D4VD's Tesla receives a parking ticket in the Hollywood Hills. Early September 2025, the Tesla is reported abandoned and towed to a vehicle impound lot. September 8, 2025, Celeste's body is discovered in the trunk of the Tesla. September 16, 2025, authorities officially identify the body as Celeste Rivas Hernandez. There was a huge gap in this timeline. More than a year passed between Celeste's disappearance and the discovery of her body. What had happened during that time? Was she alive? Where was she? And when exactly did she die? These were the questions the researchers needed to answer. In the modern age, almost every crime leaves a digital trail. Investigators knew the answers could lie in Celeste and D4VD's phones, computers, and social media accounts. They obtained court orders to access both men's phone records. They wanted to see calls, text messages, and locations recorded by their mobile devices. They also examined their social media profiles: Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, any platform where they had interacted. What they were looking for were communication patterns. When did Celeste and D4VD start talking? How often did they communicate? Were there signs of a romantic relationship? And were there messages around the time of Celeste's disappearance that might reveal what happened? According to unconfirmed sources cited by several media outlets, records showed frequent communication between Celeste and a number associated with D4VD in the months leading up to her disappearance. But after April 5th, 2024, communication abruptly ceased. Celeste's phone lost signal. There were no more messages, no more social media posts, no more signs of digital life. It was as if she had been erased from the digital world at that very moment. Finally, after days of media pressure and progressing investigation, D4VD agreed to a formal interview with Los Angeles Police Department detectives. His lawyer was present. Cameras recorded every word. According to police sources cited by Rolling Stone, D4VD denied killing Celeste. He insisted he didn't know how her body ended up in his car, but he admitted something crucial. He knew Celeste. They had been in a relationship. The exact details of that admission were not made public. Investigators kept the information classified as they continued to build their case. But the admission changed everything. D4VD could no longer deny the connection. Now, the question was whether he knew Celeste, but what exactly had happened between them, and why she had ended up dead in her car. Episode 4, The Hidden Relationship. Reconstructing how D4VD and Celeste met was crucial to understanding the case. D4VD was a rising star. After the success of Romantic Homicide and Here With Me, his fan base grew exponentially. Thousands of teenagers followed his social media, attended his concerts, and saw him as an icon of their generation. Celeste, like many young women her age, was part of that digital culture. She used TikTok, listened to viral music, and followed her favorite artists online. It's unclear exactly when or where they first met. It may have been at a concert in Los Angeles. It may have been through social media, where D4VD frequently interacted with fans. What was clear, according to Celeste's mother, was that sometime in 2023 or early 2024, her daughter began a relationship with someone named David. For a 13-year-old girl, the attention of a 19-year-old pop star must have been overwhelming, exciting, perhaps even seeming like a dream come true. But it was also fundamentally unbalanced and dangerous. Relationships between adults and minors are never equal. There's an inherent power imbalance that makes genuine consent impossible. In the case of D4VD and Celeste, this imbalance was multiple. First, the age difference. 6 years may not seem like much when it comes to two adults, but between a 19-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, the gap is enormous. They are at completely different stages of emotional, psychological, and social development. Second, fame. D4VD had millions of followers, record deals, and access to resources the average teenager couldn't imagine. That fame created a dynamic where he had all the power and she had virtually none. Third, experience. D4VD traveled the world, had access to lawyers and managers, and understood how to navigate the adult world. Celeste was still a child, still dependent on her family, still attending school. Experts in adolescent development consulted by several media outlets pointed out that these types of relationships are inherently abusive, regardless of stated intentions of either party. A 13-year-old girl cannot give informed consent to a relationship with a 19-year-old man, especially one with the status and power of celebrity. Celeste may have felt special, chosen, loved. But the reality was that she was in a vulnerable situation where control always lay in someone else's hands. Celeste's mother, reflecting on the months leading up to her daughter's disappearance, began to recall signs she hadn't correctly interpreted at the time. Celeste had begun to become more reserved. She would spend hours in her room with the door closed, texting on her phone. When her mother asked what she was doing, Celeste would respond vaguely, talking to friends. She started going out more, saying she was in friend houses or the mall. But when her mother called those friends' families to confirm, she often discovered Celeste wasn't there. She also noticed changes in her daughter's behavior. Celeste became more mature in some ways, wearing more elaborate makeup and caring about her appearance in ways she hadn't cared about before. And there was the tattoo. One day, Celeste came home with a small tattoo on her finger. When her mother asked how she got it without parental permission, Celeste got defensive and changed the subject. In retrospect, these were all classic signs of a teenager involved in a secret, potentially inappropriate relationship. But at the time, his mother had no way of knowing how dangerous the situation was. Investigators specializing in crimes against minors recognized a familiar pattern in the relationship between D4VD and Celeste. Grooming is a process by which an adult gradually manipulates a minor into an inappropriate relationship. It has predictable stages. First, the adult establishes contact and connection. This can be through shared interests, such as music in this case. It makes a child feel special, understood, and unique. Second, the adult gradually isolates the child. They encourage them to keep secrets, to lie to their parents, to create a parallel life that only the two of them share. Third, the adult normalizes inappropriate contact. This may begin with conversations about sexual topics, then progress to requests for photographs, and eventually to physical encounters. Fourth, the adult maintains control through a combination of affection and manipulation. They may threaten to end a relationship if the child doesn't comply, or use shame and guilt to keep the secret. Although investigators did not have full access to the communications between D4VD and Celeste, the known element of the case suggested that this pattern may have been present. The shared tattoo, for example, was a way to mark Celeste, to create a permanent symbol of their connection that she would carry with her always. April 5th, 2024 was the last day anyone saw Celeste Rivas Hernandez alive, at least officially. According to the missing persons report, Celeste left her home that morning. She told her mother she was going to meet friends. She was carrying her backpack and phone, and was wearing casual clothes. And he never came back. Her mother waited for hours. She called Celeste's phone repeatedly, but got no answer. After several calls, the phone went straight to voicemail, as if it was off or had no battery. When night fell and Celeste still hadn't returned, her mother called the police. Officers took the report, but initially treated the case as a typical runaway teen. Unfortunately, in a city like Los Angeles, hundreds of teenagers run away or disappear each year. Not all cases receive immediate, intensive investigation. Celeste's mother insisted something was wrong. Her daughter wasn't the kind of young woman who would run away. She hadn't had any recent fights with her family. There were no problems at school. But with no evidence of foul play, investigators told him to wait. Many teens return on their own after a few days. Celeste never did. Investigators in 2025, working retrospectively, attempted to determine where Celeste had gone on April 5th, 2024. They obtained Celeste's phone records from that day. The device had been transmitting a signal until approximately 3 p.m. The last recorded location was in a residential area of Los Angeles, not far from where D4VD lived at the time. After 3 p.m., the phone stopped transmitting. It was either turned off, destroyed, or its battery died. It never reconnected to any cellular network. Investigators also reviewed security cameras at businesses and residences in the area. One captured what appeared to be Celeste walking alone down a street around noon. On another camera, hours later, a vehicle matching the description of D4VD's Tesla was seen driving in the same area. They couldn't confirm with certainty that Celeste had entered that vehicle. The camera resolution wasn't clear enough, but the coincidence was impossible to ignore. Celeste had disappeared in the area where D4VD lived. Her phone stopped working that same day, and more than a year later, her body was found in his car. The conclusion seemed inevitable, but direct evidence was frustratingly and dangerously scarce. Episode 5, The Search Without Answers. For the first few months after Celeste's disappearance, her family lived in a tortuous limbo. Her mother organized searches. She printed hundreds of posters with Celeste's photograph. Missing, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, 13 years old. She posted them on every lamppost, every bus stop, every store that would let her put them up. She created social media accounts dedicated to finding her daughter. She posted daily updates, begged for information, and shared any leads she received. The community initially responded. Neighbors helped with the search. Celeste's friends shared posts. Some local media outlets briefly covered the story. But as the weeks passed without new leads, interest began to fade. Organized searches became less frequent. The media stopped calling. Other people's lives went on while Celeste's families remained frozen on that terrible date, April 5th, 2024. The police continued to classify the case as a missing person. There was no evidence of crime. There was no body. There were no witnesses to the kidnapping or violence. Celeste was just another missing teenager in a city full of them. While Celeste's family suffered, D4VD's career continued to flourish. During the months of 2024, following Celeste's disappearance, D4VD released new music. He performed at festivals. He traveled internationally. His Instagram account showcased a life of success and celebration. In July 2024, she released There Goes My Baby. In November, Remember Me appeared on the Arcane soundtrack. In December, Where'd It Go Wrong? The titles of these songs, in retrospect, seemed eerily prophetic. There Goes My Baby. Remember Me. Where Did We Go Wrong? Were they just generic heartbreak songs, the kind that D4VD had become famous for? Or was there something more personal, darker in their lyrics? The fans had no reason to suspect anything. They didn't know about Celeste. They didn't know that a 13-year-old girl had disappeared after supposedly being in contact with her idol. D4VD continued to be seen as a talented young man who had found success through hard work and authenticity. His public image was that of a sensitive artist who channeled adolescent emotions into beautiful, melancholic music. No one knew that image was about to completely collapse. Celeste's mother never stopped searching. Even when others lost hope, even when the police suggested Celeste probably didn't want to be found, she kept going. She hired a private investigator with money she didn't have, turned to family and friends to fund the search. The investigator reviewed the case from scratch, interviewed Celeste's friends, and tracked down every possible lead. It was this researcher who finally discovered the connection with D4VD. Interviewing Celeste's schoolmates, the investigator heard rumors. The friends mentioned that Celeste had been obsessed with D4VD, that she had said she knew him personally, that she had hinted that they had a special relationship. At first, the researcher thought they were teenage fantasies. Many young fans imagined romantic connections with their favorite celebrities. But when he showed photos of the D4VD tattoo to Celeste's mother, she blanched. It was identical to the one Celeste had gotten. The investigator contacted the police with this information. He suggested that D4VD should be interviewed as part of the missing persons investigation. But without concrete evidence of a crime, without proof that D4VD had done anything illegal, the police were reluctant to approach a public celebrity. The risk of unfounded accusations and defamation lawsuits was too high. The information was added to the case file, but no immediate action was taken until the body was found. From April 2024 to September 2025, 17 months, more than 500 days. All this time, Celeste's body had been somewhere. Investigators needed to determine where. Was it in the Tesla the whole time? It was unlikely. The smell would have been impossible to hide after the first few weeks. Someone would have noticed it long before then. Was it stored elsewhere and moved to the Tesla only recently? Perhaps in August when the vehicle was abandoned? That seemed more likely. But where had the body been for over a year? And why move it at that specific time? Forensic scientists were trying to answer these questions by examining the body and trunk of the Tesla for clues. They found traces of soil and organic material that didn't match the area where the Tesla was abandoned. This suggested the body had been buried somewhere before being placed in the vehicle. They also found fabric fibers, remnants of what appeared to be a different bag or container. Celeste had been moved multiple times since her death. Every detail added complexity to the case, but it also brought investigators closer to the truth. As the investigation progressed, detectives gained access to D4VD's personal files, including unreleased music. Among the dozens of songs in various stages of production, they found Celeste. The song was dated. It had been written in May 2024, a month after Celeste's disappearance. The researchers listened to the song repeatedly, analyzing every word. The lyrics spoke of an intense relationship, of shared secrets, of love that crossed forbidden boundaries. There was one particularly disturbing line. No one can find you. No one needs to know. You're only mine forever in the cold. Was it a poetic metaphor or something more literal? The song had never been officially released. D4VD had never mentioned it publicly, but it existed in his archives, with the victim's name as the title, created weeks after her disappearance. Prosecutors considered whether this song could be used as evidence. Did it constitute an implied confession? Or was it simply artistic expression protected by freedom of expression? The answer wasn't clear, but it definitely didn't help D4VD's defense. Weeks after the body was discovered, forensic experts finally determined Celeste Rivas Hernandez's cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head, multiple skull fractures, the type of injury consistent with being repeatedly struck with a heavy object. It wasn't a quick or accidental death. It was violent, intentional, brutal. They also determined, based on the state of decomposition and tissue analysis, that Celeste had died around April or May of 2024, shortly after her disappearance. This meant that he hadn't survived months in captivity. His death had occurred relatively quickly after April 5th, but his body had been hidden for over a year, moved, relocated, finally placed in D4VD's Tesla and abandoned. The question that now obsessed researchers was simple but fundamental. Why? Why hide a body for over a year and then leave in your own car where it would inevitably be found? Was it panic? Guilt? A subconscious desire to be caught? Or there was something else, something they didn't yet understand, driving the killer's actions? Episode 6. The case is built. With the cause of death established, investigators intensified their search for physical evidence that directly connected D4VD to the crime. The Tesla's interior was thoroughly searched. Every surface was examined for fingerprints, DNA, fibers, any trace that might tell the story of what had happened. They found Celeste's DNA in the trunk, obviously, given that her body had been there. But they also found her fingerprints inside the vehicle, on the passenger door handle, on the dashboard, and on the back of the seat. This confirmed that Celeste had been inside the Tesla while she was alive. She had been a passenger in D4VD's vehicle. They also found hair that didn't belong to either Celeste or D4VD. This suggested that someone else had possibly been present at some point. An accomplice? A witness? Investigators added this clue to their growing list of unanswered questions. In the trunk, in addition to the body, they found remnants of adhesive tape, additional plastic, and what appeared to be tools, a folding shovel and work gloves. All of this painted the picture of someone who had tried to hide evidence of a crime, but who had ultimately made crucial mistakes. Digital forensics experts worked in parallel, digging into D4VD and Celeste's electronic devices. From Celeste's phone, which had been recovered from the system, although the physical device was never found, they were able to extract backups stored in the cloud. The text messages between Celeste and a number registered to D4VD began in January 2024. At first, they were innocent conversations about music, anime, everyday life. But gradually they became more personal, more intimate. D4VD asked about Celeste's family life, whether her parents were strict, whether she had privacy at home. He started asking for pictures. First, normal photos, casual selfies. Then, specifically asking for photos where she looked pretty or special. The messages also showed they had met in person at least 3 times before April 5th. D4VD would pick Celeste up at discrete locations, spend time together, and then drop her off near her home. In the March messages, D4VD expressed concern that someone might discover their relationship. "We need to be more careful," he wrote. "People wouldn't understand what we have." The last messages between them were on April 4th, the day before Celeste disappeared. "D4VD, can you come tomorrow? I need to see you. Celeste, yes, I'll tell my mom I'm going with friends. D4VD, okay, I'll pick you up at the usual place. 3 p.m. Celeste, okay, red heart." That was the last message Celeste sent. Based on evidence of soil and organic material found with Celeste's body, investigators suspected that she had been buried somewhere before being transported to the Tesla. They obtained search warrants for multiple properties associated with D4VD. His primary residence in Los Angeles, a home his family owned in Houston, and a recording studio he frequented. At each location, forensic teams looked for signs of recently disturbed earth, areas that could have been used as a temporary burial site. On the Los Angeles property, they found an area in the backyard where the vegetation seemed to have grown differently than the rest of the garden. The soil in that area had been disturbed over the past 18 months. They dug carefully. About a meter deep, they found evidence that confirmed their suspicions. Plastic debris, fibers matching those found in the Tesla, and traces of decomposition in the soil. This had been Celeste's original burial site. She had been buried in the backyard of D4VD's property for over a year. The question was, why was it dug up and moved to the Tesla in August 2025? Investigators brought in forensic psychologists and criminal profiling experts to help understand the motive behind Celeste's murder. The profile that emerged was that of a narcissist with controlling tendencies, someone accustomed to getting what he wanted, who saw people as extensions of his own will rather than as autonomous individuals. The relationship between D4VD and Celeste fit a common pattern in abuse cases. A powerful adult seeks out a vulnerable victim, gradually establishes control, and when the victim attempts to assert independence or threatens to expose a relationship, the abuser reacts violently. Experts theorize that something happened on April 5th that triggered the fatal violence. Perhaps Celeste had threatened to tell someone about their relationship. Perhaps she had decided she wanted to end things. Perhaps she had simply done something that D4VD perceived as betrayal. Whatever the trigger, the response was disproportionately violent. The blunt force trauma that killed Celeste had required strength and determination. It wasn't an accidental shove or a moment of blind rage. It was sustained and lethal. The decision to disinter Celeste's body after more than a year and place it in the Tesla remained a mystery. Researchers developed several theories. Theory 1. D4VD was planning to flee the country and wanted to dispose of the evidence in a way that couldn't be traced back to his property. Abandoning the Tesla in the Hollywood Hills with the body inside could make it look like a robbery or a random crime. Theory 2. The psychological strain of living with a body buried in his backyard for over a year became unbearable. Perhaps he was planning to remodel the property and feared the body will be discovered by construction workers. Theory 3. He had suffered a psychological breakdown. Guilt, combined with the stress of maintaining his public image while concealing a horrific crime, led him to make a self-destructive decision. Theory 4. It wasn't his decision. Perhaps someone else had discovered the buried body and threatened to expose it unless he took action. Each theory had evidence to support it and contradictions that challenged it. The truth was likely a complex combination of psychological factors, fear, guilt, and changing circumstances. On September 23, 2025, 2 weeks after the discovery of Celeste's body, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office announced they would file formal charges against David Anthony Burke, professionally known as D4VD. The charges included first-degree murder, sexual abuse of a minor, unlawful relationship with a minor, tampering with evidence, and concealing a corpse. If convicted on all charges, D4VD faced life in prison without the possibility of parole. The arraignment hearing was scheduled for the following week. D4VD was arrested at his Los Angeles residence without incident. He offered no resistance. Images of his arrest instantly went viral. The young man who had been seen as the voice of a generation was now being dragged in front of cameras in handcuffs, head bowed, surrounded by officers. His record labels issued statements cutting all ties with him. His songs were removed from editorial playlists on streaming platforms. His social media accounts were shut down or suspended. In a matter of hours, D4VD went from rising star to complete pariah. But for Celeste's family, the charges were just beginning. True justice would come at trial. Episode 7, The Pending Judgment. The Tesla D4VD murder case, as the media dubbed it, became one of the most closely watched trials of the year. Each preliminary hearing was covered by dozens of media outlets. True crime podcasts dedicated entire episodes to analyzing every detail. Legal experts appeared on national television, debating the strength of the prosecution's case. Celeste's family found themselves at the center of a media storm. Every statement was amplified, every tear captured by cameras. Celeste's mother gave limited interviews, always with the same message. She wanted justice for her daughter. Celeste was just a little girl, she said in a particularly poignant interview. She had her whole life ahead of her, and he took it away from her. He manipulated her, abused her, killed her, and then lived his life as if nothing had happened for over a year. I need the world to know who my daughter really was. Not just a victim in a crime story, but a real person with dreams and a family who loved her. D4VD hired one of the most prestigious criminal defense teams in Los Angeles. Their attorneys worked around the clock to build a case that could counter the mountain of evidence the prosecution had accumulated. The defense strategy had several components. First, they would question the chain of custody of the evidence. Had the Tesla been properly processed from the moment of discovery? Could any of the evidence have been contaminated? Second, they would argue that the circumstantial evidence, however compelling, didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that D4VD had killed Celeste. The text messages showed they knew each other, yes, but they didn't prove murder. The body in her car was gruesome, but it could be explained as vehicle theft, even if there hadn't been a prior report. Third, they would question the forensic determination of exactly when Celeste died. If they could cast doubt on the chronology, they could argue that D4VD had solid alibis for critical moments. It was a delicate strategy, fraught with potential problems, but it was all they had. As the preliminary hearings progressed, several key witnesses began to emerge. Celeste's friends would testify about conversations where she mentioned David, describing how she felt special because of his attention, but also sometimes afraid of disappointing him. A recording studio technician where D4VD frequently worked would testify that in May 2024, D4VD had appeared upset and distracted, canceling sessions and acting erratically. A neighbor of D4VD's Los Angeles property would testify that he had seen suspicious activity in the backyard late at night in April 2024, with lights and sounds of digging. Each testimony added another layer to the narrative the prosecution was building. D4VD had killed Celeste, buried her on his property, and lived with that secret for more than a year before finally moving the body in an act of panic or desperation. But perhaps the most devastating testimony would come from D4VD's own digital archives. Digital analysis experts would testify about internet searches he had conducted in the days following Celeste's disappearance. How long does it take for a body to decompose? Depth needed to bury evidence. How to clean DNA from a vehicle. These searches have been conducted from his personal computer, using his IP address, with no serious attempt to hide his digital trail. Throughout the preliminary hearings, D4VD remained silent. He exercised his constitutional right not to testify against himself. He wore understated suits, a far cry from the casual, youthful clothes he wore at his concerts. His hair was slicked back. His expressions were carefully neutral. The court observers tried to read something in his body language. Did he show remorse? Fear? Calculating coldness? The truth was, it was hard to tell. Sometimes he seemed to be silently crying. Other times, he seemed completely disconnected, as if he were witnessing someone else's trial. His lawyers strongly advised against making public statements. Anything he said could and would be used against him. Silence was his best legal strategy, even though it made him look guilty in the eyes of many. But on one occasion, when Celeste's mother was testifying about the last days she saw her daughter, D4VD was clearly seen wiping away tears. It was a human moment in the midst of a process that had turned him into a media monster. Were they tears of remorse, of self-pity, or simply an emotional response to the weight of what she was facing? No one could know for sure. The case divided public opinion in complex ways. On one side were those who unequivocally believed in D4VD's guilt. The evidence was overwhelming. The pattern of behavior was clear. He was a predator who had used his fame to lure a vulnerable girl, abuse her, and ultimately kill her when she became a problem. On the other hand, there were those who maintained that everyone deserves a presumption of innocence until proven guilty. They argued that the prosecution was building a case based primarily on circumstances, and that there were alternative explanations for every piece of evidence. And then there was a third group, perhaps the most troubling, those who partially blamed Celeste. In the darkest corners of the internet, some argued that she should have known better, that she put herself in that situation, that she lied about her age. These comments completely ignored the legal and moral reality. A 13-year-old girl cannot consent to a relationship with a 19-year-old adult. The power imbalance, the developmental difference, the legal responsibility, all fell on D4VD, not Celeste. Child advocacy organizations used the case as an example of why laws protecting minors from sexual exploitation are crucial. They pointed out that grooming in the digital age was easier than ever, with celebrities and public figures having direct access to young fans through social media. After months of preliminary hearings, legal motions, and preparation, a date for the full trial was finally set. The trial was scheduled to begin on January 15th, 2026. It was expected to last between 6 and 8 weeks. 12 jurors and 4 alternates would be selected from a pool of potential jurors who had been carefully vetted to ensure they could be impartial despite the massive media coverage of the case. The prosecution had a well-built case, physical, digital, and testimonial evidence all pointing to the same conclusion. D4VD had murdered Celeste Rivas Hernandez and had hidden her body for over a year. The defense had its strategy: question every piece of evidence, raise reasonable doubt, remind the jury that probable is not enough for a conviction. It must be beyond a reasonable doubt. Celeste's family was preparing to relive the trauma of their loss in front of cameras and a national audience. And D4VD, the young man who 3 years earlier had been just a teenager playing video games in his bedroom, faced the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. The trial would determine more than just their legal guilt or innocence. It would determine how society responded to cases of abuse of power, child exploitation, and the accountability of public figures. But that story was yet to be written. The verdict was yet to come. Episode 8, Reflections and Consequences. As the world awaited the trial, many began to ask broader questions about how the system had failed Celeste Rivas Hernandez. There had been warning signs from the start. A 13-year-old girl with changing behavior, mysterious outings, and a legally obtained tattoo. Why weren't alarm bells ringing sooner? Child protection experts noted that families often don't recognize the signs of grooming until it's too late. Perpetrators are adept at making everything seem normal, creating reasonable explanations for troubling behavior. They also criticized the police's initial response when Celeste was reported missing. The case was treated as a routine teenage runaway, not as a potential victim of a predator that she was. If investigators had followed David's trail from beginning, if they had identified and interviewed D4VD immediately, could what followed have been avoided? It was impossible to know, but the question haunted many involved in the case. The D4VD case sent shockwaves through the music industry. Record labels began implementing stricter policies regarding interaction between artists and underage fans. Some companies completely banned artists from communicating directly with fans under the age of 18 through private messages on social media. Managers and artist teams received training on how to identify signs of inappropriate behavior and what steps to take if they suspected an artist was involved with a minor. Festivals and concert venues have implemented stricter protocols regarding backstage access, especially for young fans. But critics pointed out that these measures, although well-intentioned, came too late for Celeste and countless other victims who have been exploited by powerful figures in the entertainment industry. The case also reignited conversations about celebrity culture and the access fans have to their idols in the digital age. The perceived intimacy of social media created the illusion of personal connection, making young people particularly vulnerable to manipulation. After the charges against D4VD were made public, other young women began coming forward with their own stories. Some shared screenshots of conversations with D4VD where he had made inappropriate comments about their appearance or asked for photographs. Others described in-person encounters after concerts where D4VD had shown romantic interest in them despite being underage. None of these interactions had progressed to the level of the relationship with Celeste, but they all followed the same pattern. An adult man with fame and power approaching vulnerable teenagers. Investigators carefully reviewed these allegations. Some were determined to be credible and could result in additional charges. Others were more difficult to verify or did not meet the threshold for criminal conduct, although they were ethically problematic. What became clear was that Celeste probably wasn't the only young woman with whom D4VD had crossed boundaries. She was simply the one who had suffered the most tragic consequences. The case sparked national conversations about age of consent laws and child protection. In California, the age of consent is 18, which clearly made the relationship between D4VD and Celeste illegal. But in other states, laws vary, with ages of consent as low as 16 in some places. Activists argued that these laws needed to be uniform and protective, especially in cases involving significant age differences and power imbalances. They also noted that existing laws were often not properly enforced. Many cases of child sexual exploitation never result in charges because victims are afraid to come forward, or because perpetrators have no resources to avoid consequences. The D4VD case, for all its horror, had at least resulted in charges and a legal process. Many victims never see that kind of justice. Lawmakers in several states have begun proposing stricter laws regarding relationships between adults and minors, particularly when elements of authority or fame are involved. Photographs of a smiling girl, dreams that will never come true, a life cut short. Amid all the media attention, legal analysis, and social media conversations, it was easy to forget that at the center of the story was a real little girl who had lost her life. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was 13 years old when she disappeared. She enjoyed anime, spent time with friends, and dreamed about her future like any teenager. Her family established a foundation in her name dedicated to protecting minors from sexual exploitation and supporting families of missing persons. The Celeste Foundation would provide resources, education, and advocacy to prevent other families from experiencing the same horror. Her mother became a powerful voice in the movement to protect children from predators, particularly those who use fame or status to access young victims. Celeste deserved to grow up, she said in a public speech. She deserved to be 18, 21, 30, 50. She deserved to fall in love with someone appropriate for her, to have a career, maybe a family of her own. All of that was stolen from her. We can't give her back her life, but we can honor her memory by protecting other children. Celeste's smiling photograph became a symbol of a broader cause. Her story, though tragic, inspired changes that would potentially save others. At the time of this report, the trial of David Anthony Burke, known as D4VD, has not yet begun. It is scheduled for January 2026. What happens at that trial will determine his legal future. If he's convicted of first-degree murder, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. If he's acquitted, he'll face a different kind of sentence, living as a man everyone believes killed Celeste Rivas Hernandez, even without a legal conviction. But beyond D4VD's individual fate, this case has left permanent marks on many levels. It has changed how the music industry interacts with young fans. It has sparked conversations about the age of consent, child protection, and the responsibility of public figures. It has reminded society that fame does not elevate one above the law or morality. And most importantly, it has given a voice to Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a girl whose life was silenced, whose disappearance was initially ignored, whose death was hidden for over a year. Now his name is known, his story is told. His life, though tragically short, matters. Justice for Celeste will or will not come in a jury verdict, but her legacy is already written in the lives her story has touched, in the policies that have changed in her name, in the other girls who will potentially be protected because the world finally paid attention. In memory of Celeste Rivas Hernandez 2010-2024, their story will not be forgotten